I want to tell you a story about my family. But before I do that, I want to introduce you to the main character of this story. This is my little girl. Her name is Hasti. She is 9 years old and she loves dancing and she dreams someday of being a chef when she grows up. She's just an incredibly friendly, loving, joyful little girl. And our story that I want to tell you begins on a totally normal Thursday in 2018. And on that morning, I drove with Hasti to a routine geneticist's appointment. And I sat down in a blue plastic chair in front of the doctor's desk. And the doctor looked at me and said, "Mr. Brannigan, we have a diagnosis for Hasti. Hasti has a rare disease called Cornelia de Lange syndrome." She then went on to tell me that CDLS is life-limiting and life-shortening. And I didn't immediately say anything because I was waiting for her to say, "But there's a treatment that we can use." But that but never came. She told me, in fact, that there were no treatment options, that CDLS was genetic. So all we could do was to go home and learn to live with the symptoms. I felt like I was glued to that blue plastic chair. I felt like the world was opening up underneath my feet and I was falling in. And up until that moment, I had believed that bad things happen to other people. Bad things don't happen to me. But on that Thursday, it was me. And the doctor gave me some leaflets and she sent me on my way. And I remember distinctly in the car on the way home saying to myself, "Please don't cry in front of Hasti." And I arrived home and my wife knew something was wrong. But I couldn't say anything, not even a word, for such a long time because I couldn't find the words to tell my wife that the future she was hoping for her little girl was just not going to happen. And I went through every possible negative emotion, grief and loss and anger in the weeks and months that came after that. But my wife and I are really stubborn people, and we did the only thing that we knew we could do. We read everything about CDLS and about genetic conditions, and our reading kept taking us back to gene therapy because we kept finding articles that were saying gene therapy was doing amazing things for some really sick kids who had other genetic conditions. And we, as two non-doctors, kept saying, could there be gene therapy for CDLS? So we called every researcher that we could find from Japan to Texas, and we begged them for their time and asked them if a gene therapy could be possible for our daughter's condition. And they all gave us the same answer. They said it's hugely complex. It will cost millions and millions of dollars, and the journey for your family will be incredibly difficult. But it is possible. My wife and I didn't have millions of dollars. We're two normal people with two normal jobs, and we knew that if we were going to try and do this, we would have to ask for help. And in asking for help, we were going to have to tell our story. And that was a really big problem for us because we hadn't told anybody that Hasti had a rare condition. We hadn't told our parents. We hadn't even told Hasti's brothers because we just didn't want anybody to treat her any differently. And on one night in January 2020, my wife and I were discussing this and what we should do. And I almost had a total mental breakdown because I read a quote, and the quote said, "What you're not changing, you're choosing." And that brought everything into sharp relief for me. It made everything clear, because I realized what we were asking was, are we going to do something for our little girl? Or do we accept this for her? And we couldn't accept to do nothing. So that same night, I created a fundraising page and I shared it with everyone I knew on social media. And in January and February, we raised quite a lot of money. But then the pandemic hit and the UK went into lockdown. And that was an incredibly agonizing time for my wife and I, because we had already partnered with a lab who were going to create this gene therapy for Hasti's condition. We were already getting bills. And we knew if we couldn't raise this money quickly, that the research was going to fail. So we knew we were going to have to do something really big, something to capture people's imagination as soon as lockdown ended, if we were going to raise this money and change our little girl's life. So we were discussing what to do, and I said, there's a famous walking route in the UK that goes right from the bottom of the country all the way to the top. I could walk that. And my wife didn't look very impressed, if I'm honest. And I said, I'm in the army. I can wear all my army kit, weighs 25 kilos. I'll carry my little one-man tent that I could sleep in. And she was Googling the route. And she said, you do realize there are some crazy people who actually do this for fun. So we knew that wasn't going to be enough. And in a moment of pure insanity, I said, maybe I can do it barefoot. And my wife just looked at me. She said, no way, no bloody way. That is impossible. And I knew in that exact moment that that was exactly what I had to do. I was going to have to do the impossible if we were going to capture people's imagination and change my little girl's life. So on Monday, 6th of July, lockdown came to an end in the UK. So here I am in Land's End in the southwest of England, about to take my very first steps on a 700-mile barefoot march across Britain, which will finish in Edinburgh. My name is Chris Brannigan. I am a soldier in the British Army, as you'll see from all this heavy stuff I'm going to be carrying for the next month or more, but I'm not here in that capacity. I am a dad to a little girl called Hasti, who's 8 years old, but suffers from a rare genetic condition that is life-limiting and life-shortening, called CDLS. I'm not here to show how fit I am, because I'm not. I'm here to change her fate and to bring visibility to the almost 2 million kids with rare diseases in the UK. And I'm going to be carrying our favourite teddy bear with me. If I'm honest, stood there on the start line, I wasn't worried about walking 700 miles, even barefoot. I was terrified that no one would notice me. And if they did notice me, that they just wouldn't care and we wouldn't be able to raise this money. And this was me before I had finished even the first mile. Okay, so I'm like 1 mile in, 1 mile, and I've already cut this toe and that toe, which has a lovely Now you might look at me and think, hold on, this guy's in the army. You know, he's probably super fit. He probably does this kind of stuff all the time. It'll be easy for him. But in truth, I hadn't anticipated how difficult it was going to be. I'm 40 years old, I have 2 bad knees, and my day job involves me mostly sending emails and answering the phone. And I had an idea that by lunchtime on each day, I would have finished having walked 20 or 25 miles. In truth, by lunchtime on day 1, I hadn't even done 9 miles and I still had 16 to go. And this is what my foot looked like at the end of the second day. Really quite painful. Even when I wasn't walking, it was painful when I was lying down. And this was my accommodation, my little one-man tent that had to sleep me with all my kit on the inside, really quite tight, but actually it was reasonably cozy. If I'm honest, I was totally unprepared for this journey. I had no idea of the toll it was going to take on my body. I lost a lot of weight really fast. By the end of the 3rd day, I had tendonitis in both my feet. By the end of the 1st week, I had open wounds on the bottom of both of my feet, which became infected. By the end of 14 days, this is what my feet looked like. I took these photographs in hospital where the doctor told me, you need to stop or you risk damaging your feet permanently. And I was receiving messages from social media by the hundreds from people who were saying exactly the same. And my wife and Hasti came to the hospital that day. And as I looked at her, I realized that being able to choose to stop was a luxury that she just didn't have. She couldn't choose to stop having a rare disease. So I had to keep walking. And there were other reminders about why this was so important. On the 4th day, I met Nicola and Mike and their little boy. They jumped out of their car at the side of the road and they told me about their other son who they lost at 8 years old to a rare disease. And I confided in Nicola that I didn't think I was going to finish because I was already in so much pain from the walk. And she just looked straight at me and she said, you have to keep going. Keep talking about rare disease. So I did. And the next day I met Joan and Martin, and they travelled for 2 hours to find me on a back road just to show me a picture of their little boy Thomas. Thomas passed away at just a few months old, and he had CDLS, just like Hasti. And every day I met families like these who were living under the shadow of rare disease. And I had become like a magnet for people who just didn't know how to cope. I realized that this journey was now so much bigger than Hope for Hasti. Every day I posted my route on Facebook, and every day people showed up to walk beside me. People came out of their homes to meet me and to give me a donation, and not because I was a soldier or because I was walking some long distance across the country, but because I was a dad who was doing the only thing that he could to change his little girl's life. And because they resonated with the question that we kept asking, how far would you go for your child? And after 35 days of walking with just 1 to go, I thought my final day would be my easiest, having already done 670 something miles. But it was actually my hardest. And not because I was tired, but because I was just anxious to see my family again after such a long time. And as I turned that final corner and I saw Edinburgh Castle ahead of me and the sun setting behind, my family were stood in the middle of the road waiting for me, and my little girl came running to give me a hug. 700 miles, 19 or 20 counties, I think. More blisters than I can count. Infections, bloody feet, glass. Hope for Hasti, look at that. Yes, good.
Oh, I think this is Joe that's written this.
That evening, as I finally sat down next to my wife on the couch, I checked our Just Giving page and saw that we had raised over £500,000. It wasn't the millions that we needed to conclude this project, but it was enough to get our research off the ground and moving. And listening to this story, you may think that I'm the hero of the story, but you'd be wrong. For me, the real heroes of the story were the people who showed up every day to walk beside me, who fed me, who stood over me as I slept at the side of the road. They were my heroes. And you all behind the scenes. Because for a dad like me, who receives bad news on a Thursday afternoon, it's your work that makes a diagnosis possible. It's the work that you do that stretches the limits of what can be achieved. Thank you for everything you're doing.